let's say hi to everybody.
Hello.
First, this is our first video session where we're welcoming our guests. My name is Jean Diev. I'm the CEO of Stobox, and we have Fabien Bouhier, our friend, who is a blockchain architect, who is a TED speaker, who is a great person and a great professional in the industry. Also have Boris Pikalov, who's the head of analytics of Stobox, also welcoming. And we hear, with this coronavirus, what we hear today is like fintech, and everybody's speaking about how people can make transactions fast and using their mobile phones without leaving their sofa, opening accounts. So Fab, you're in Amsterdam right now. How do things, are now in fintech from your perspective in Europe? What is hot at the moment? Where the industry goes? What do you think?
I think a lot of things changed. The landscape in fintech is changing. I think the reason is that a lot of the startups were actually struggling during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's hard for startups to survive and to transact, right? So a lot of people now are looking at how can we digitalize some of the administrative process today that are stopping the startups from being able to access cash or do bridge funding with the governments. And a lot of different digitalization of ID is happening at the moment, which is really, really interesting. And people starting to realize that what if in a case you don't have any infrastructure and it's impossible to meet people face to face, how can you actually still make the economy go in a trustless environment where you can actually transact faster and still have that trust in people and government bodies that you're dealing with? So yeah, it's quite interesting actually.
I believe that the old traditional banks or brick and mortar banks, the way we used to go and open a bank account with a face-to-face person or make a wire transaction using going there by feet to brick and mortar, is something that would be very soon be called a legacy. And we see this transaction moving on. What do you think are the challenges for fintech startups to overcome that old routine? Is it difficult, or what do you think? How's that works?
It's pretty hard because most of the fintech today are waiting for government and regulations to help them, right? Because a fintech product based on the regulations that they have in the country, if you want to transact at the European level, you have to meet a lot of different requirements, and it's really, really hard. Another thing also that happens in the banking industry is you have cases here where startups are receiving funding, but the money is stuck at the bank because they cannot go through the AML protocols because the banks are closed. So you end up in a situation where startups are dying because they cannot get a paper signed and the money is there. So, this is a huge problem that is very, very easily fixable using, technology today.
I think it's a huge problem unless you raise with crypto and hold your private keys with you. Then you basically, then you can own your money with your own hands and make those transactions.
Exactly.
But you don't even need to do it with crypto. You can do it with common payment system using fintech as well, which do have some AML procedures.
Yeah, exactly. But if it is, for example, like you say, brick and mortar, like a check, for example, right? Like if you pay someone more than $10,000 or 10,000 euros, it's going to get flagged, and you're going to need to provide different documentation. Usually, you need to have like a first face-to-face
Recognition.
Exactly, right? But like, how can you digitalize that in a case where you can't have that face-to-face anymore? So I think people are forced to relook at these options, and fintech is reinventing themselves because it's not a technology problem. The tech is there to solve these issues. It's a matter of having governmental support and educating the companies that the solutions are there and they are not as there's a problem of trust of this, right? So like, how do you actually um, reassure the public that using this technology is safe and secure and so on, right? So that is also a huge part of educating the market.
I think that, exactly, I think that letting know and making sure that people trust you, that's one of the key aspects of fintech. Because you can build anything with the technology these days, but the matter of trust is something that you gain within some time. Also, what I see from Stobox perspective is once we were focused on tokenization for some time, and now we're looking at the direction of fintech, especially in terms of payment institutions, MEs, and other kind of semi-bank financial operators. And we see that there's a lot of demand. There's a lot of people, especially who have those transnational monies going in and out. They require their own financial instrument or license in order to be efficient in those operations, because they cannot rely on the traditional banking system anymore because of the COVID and because of the digital way. And I see there's a lot of demand for those MEs, which is, and it stands for Electronic Money Institution. We're from UK or from Estonia. Have you dealt with something like this? Are you aware that those companies are kind of providing banking service, but they're not banks literally, so they're not allowed to give you a credit or to you cannot make a deposit account, but you can create a current account and be much flexible digital way with that. Are you aware of these things?
Yeah, I think EMIS is definitely the only way to go moving forward because it's all digitalized. Like creation of IBAN numbers is done on the spot, right? So you don't have to wait and then delay and the regulation on EMIS is a lot more flexible also. So if you have a bank which is in Asia and then you want to trade with Europe, you don't have to go through that massive headache of a lot of different documentations and then I need this paper and with this paper you pass your KYCs once, you're recognized within that institution because the EMI license provide you with that security and then you're able to transact instantly. I think EMI is good also because you need to pay for the license, right? And it has its own protocol. So it's not something that you can just get like this, right? So
you comply, or you should comply with whatever regulation you're building from.
Exactly. I mean, you need to comply, but you need to comply once, right? And then your clients, once you have that license, they are able to just basically, it's an extremely scalable model for companies who want to do business in the regions where they are not coming from that country, for example. So if you're in Asia and you want to deal with Europe, you can set up a European bank account using a company that has EMI and able to transact within Europe. So it's a lot easier for you to be dealing with international markets and meeting other people's regulations.
But also, I think apart from the corporate sector, we have a huge public sector, and we still have 2 billion people unbanked around the world. And look what happened with Revolut, skyrocketing, and what they offer is basically a virtual bank account with a card. Look at N26, which just last week they fundraised it was another round for, I think it was $100 million, which they raised for expanding their operation. And again, it's just a license with a software that is able to provide you any type of bank account that you actually can accept money on and start spending them with. And that with is NFC's chip, or it's a business card. And we encounter millions of people that are just knocking into those companies and trying to get those accounts. So I see this huge market for FinTech, not only from the corporate perspective, but from a personal.
I think the public is quite important, and again, it's a part of the education process, right? Like, how do you actually put the word out for those people? There's a bunch of countries in Asia or even Africa where they're still using the SMS model to top up credit as a banking system.
Whatever makes them happy.
So how do you actually, but that worked because there is no other choices for them, right? Like it's really hard to tap into these markets. But again, it's not a technology issue because, as you say, like this is easily implementable. But the problem is in these countries, for example, it's addresses. Like, it's really hard to put an address into villages in those countries. So you can use solutions like UNL. I'm not sure if you heard of UNL, which is an address referencing using the blockchain and IP locations. So it's really cool.
Wow.
So instead of having, for example, the government that tells you you live in D18, blah, 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 here they will use the, like geographic data to give you a portion of a square that has its own identity that it's allocated to you. And then that reference you as an address. So you can link this to a banking system that tells you this is where I live, this is all my data included into the blockchain. And then from then I can create a bank account and be completely digitalized. So I think this is something that just can blow up the market.
I think you come directly from the future.
Banks still have to accept it.
Nobody knows that, but I think you come directly from the future. But this is only one part of the future. The other part of the future, which I see, so I believe there'll be more and more M&As in this market, where one AMI would be sold to another fund or another financial institution, and counting millions of accounts. Do you think that is possible, or what do you think about that? Will it be a global bank, global digital bank, or digital AMI at one point of our life?
I mean, definitely. At the end of the day, I think any financial institution should be like an API. Should be like, just plug yourself in. This is the level of data that we have. You want to build your protocols on top, right? Just go ahead and do so. But this is the building block, like a Lego block of information that we require to trade with each other. And then being able to build other stuff on top of it, build some kind of a protocol like we've discussed in the past, right? To be able to really have that communication. Because at the end of the day, right, it's just the same amount of papers that we require. It's the same stuff that we ask all over the world, right? It's just a bit more data as we trade more money, right? But at the end of the day, those are the same stuff. So I think it's going to have to be homogenized at some point. And the only way to do this is to create something that is a block that allows all the markets to build on top of each other.
I think that's a good concept. I know that you know a lot of things about Stobox and about tokenization, about what we do in this market. But this is something that we focus on at the moment. It's a bit coming out from our topic of FinTech, but our listeners, I'll give an insight that we do the same kind of box, but for securities, for digital securities. Because as with money, securities have to be tied to a certain regulation and have to be kind of encountered in some jurisdictions and have to be assigned or owned by people who are actually whitelisted and who can or cannot hold those things. So we, as you said, there'll be a big framework for financial operations. We are working on the subject of building the same just for the securities. And this is a very niche thing, but again, if you don't want to leave your sofa and you want to invest and you want to be a shareholder, or if you want to sell a stake in your company, that's something that you will be able to do with your mobile phone at some point of our hopefully distant future.
All right, very exciting stuff.
Yeah. Boris, do you have any questions? What's up, buddy? How are you?
Oh, I am great. Thanks for asking. Fabien, I know that you help many companies with transformation and with implementing technology. And it is often hard, especially if you are a bank with a lot of regulatory rules and operations, and for any business. And I wonder, based on your experience, what are the main internal challenges in implementing the actual transformation of operations of technology? What advice would you give to entrepreneurs willing to move to the future?
That's a very good question, Boris. Thank you for asking this. I think it really depends on the size of the company, right? Like entrepreneurs today that are just starting, so they are more on the early stage seed. It's a lot easier for them to make changes into their operation and integrate more complex technologies, right? Where it comes down to cost for them. So how do you make this technology more affordable so you can actually target a mass audience that can work on your technology? That's the one point. Another one is if you're in a scale-up stage, right, and you already are a Series A or a Series B, it means you already have a customer audience that is quite large, right? And what's important there is that you communicate the new infrastructure that you're putting into place, especially when it comes to complex technology like blockchain, for example. It might scare your clientele off. So how do you reassure the people that this is the right move for the company, that's the right move for them also as customers? And that's another educational part. But there are a lot of different companies today that are struggling with the COVID and need to pivot what they're doing. And in that pivot, it actually is a great opportunity for them to introduce new technologies and say, hey, you know, things are a little bit different today. We have this new way of doing this, and this is a new technology that we can provide to facilitate that transition. I can give you an example. I cannot name a company, but there is a company that I've been talking to who they were having like internet cafes, and basically, you know, they were all shut down. So how do you actually pivot from there? So they
you start bringing coffee back to home.
No, but what they did is they brought the laptop at home. Mm-hmm. So people can actually lease the computer for an extended period of time. So you have to build a technology to actually facilitate that leasing process, right? So you went from a traditional brick and mortar where I go to the cafe and I pay by the hour, and now you switch to a business model where you can lease a computer for an extended period of time. So that's the perfect point where you can slide in technology and educate your clientele at the same time. And that was a huge success and created an entire new branch of revenue stream.
And a new business model.
And a new business model, absolutely. So, you know, I think those are challenging times, but that's where your creative juice gets the most challenged, and that people come up with very interesting stuff.
I think
Indeed,
that
flexibility and creativity are probably crucial points to create change. And probably there are many unexpected and unexplored applications of fintech. And even ourselves coming into this field, we are opening many new mm, exciting things. So I wonder, what are the most unknown applications of fintech that businesses and personal and individuals can use? Because payments is something that most of us know that you can facilitate payments with technology. But what are the niche applications that you think will explode and in the next few years?
Another great question.
Boris is good in great questions.
Yeah, I know.
I hope he's as great as now giving the great answers.
I think what really, so of course payment is making a lot of changes and is changing the industry quite a lot. I think what's going to happen is we're going to be able to digitalize our ID now. I think ID is going to be a lot more easier to put on an application. And since that will become some kind of a block, it will allow you to tap in other different systems and basically apply for stuff a lot faster. So if you want to rent an apartment, if you want to buy a car, if you want to have a loan in a bank, you wouldn't have to go through all these complicated processes. You would just have a digital ID that can ask for a granular level of data that you're able to pick and choose and approve, and let other people plug into you. Right? I think this needs to change. People give platform and we are going there, giving them all the data, but we can slowly take back ownership of that data and decide what we want to share with people. And not necessarily platform and advertisers, but institutions and governments that want to be doing business and trade with us. Because now we're giving with the COVID, we've given away our data with the whole Bluetooth and tracing and all this. Like we just opened the floodgates basically, and that will switch quite a lot in the next few months once the first wave is gone and people are going to reflect on how that whole pandemic was handled nationwide and worldwide. And I think we're going to see a lot of changes in the population.
Plus, I think that thing which you said, sorry, Boris, I think that thing that you said is perfectly correlates to something which is called Web 3.0.
Yeah.
Which is a different subject and different topic for hours and hours of discussions, but that's something that clicks as a piece of the puzzle. What you just said into the concept of Web 3.0.
Yeah, I think this is definitely, very, very important. So identity and location, able to identify yourself locally, are going to really change the game. Because if you, ideally, we just need to be an API. This data, this phone needs to be able to plug itself in different institutions. We don't want to be, if we live in a world of pandemic and let's say this was the new reality where everything will be closed and no more face-to-face interaction, how can you do business? How can you survive? In India, they had 120 million new and unemployed people. How do you do? How can you manage this? If the government is offering help or like a bridge funding or whatever, and you cannot go out, how can you help this 120 new and unemployed? It's a nightmare, right?
New challenges before the industry, and I think that's really good that smart people are inside of this FinTech. Thank you, Boris. We move on.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Fab.
Fab, thank you, brother.